back to another Oxford Eats segment. This is Oxford County Library's virtual cookbook club.
I'm Leslie, and this is Shannon, and we're here with Alayne from Rosy's Kitchen.
Hi, I'm Alayne, and this is the 1-year anniversary of Rosy's Kitchen. I'm really happy to be on Oxford Eats today. Rosy's Kitchen is a dedicated gluten-free kitchen, and we also make vegan baking, which is dairy and egg-free.
So Alayne, we're really excited to learn about the gluten and vegan baking. I don't think either of us really have much experience in this, so this is a big treat for us. What are we going to be looking into today?
So today I'm going to cover some different gluten-free flours and starches and mixes. We're going to make a vegan flaxseed egg that will work really well in your baking to replace normal eggs. And we're also going to make some coconut raspberry muffins.
Okay, well let's get started.
Okay, so I wanted to go over first of all today with you guys different flours and starches that we use at Rosy's Kitchen in our gluten-free baking. So flours and starches are very different from each other, but they both are necessary in a gluten-free flour mix to make up the components so that they act like a gluten flour, like wheat. So first on the bottom here I have oat flour. So I'm just going to mix it so you can see it's a little bit lumpy, coarse flour. Oat flour absorbs water very, very well, and it is a light flour on the gluten-free flours. Then I have sorghum flour. This is my favorite flour to use in baking. It's highly nutritious, a really great tasting flour. You have to just make sure that you get the white sorghum flour because the other red varieties are very soapy tasting, and I think sorghum flour got a bad rap at first because of that taste, but now it's awesome. And I use it in almost all of my recipes. If your recipe calls for brown rice flour, you need the fine grind flour. I don't use brown rice flour in hardly any of my recipes because sorghum flour actually acts the same as brown rice flour. So whenever a recipe calls for brown rice flour and maybe you can't have rice or you don't want a lot of rice in your diet, you can swap it out for sorghum flour. Next is millet flour. It's a very fine ground flour. It comes from a little yellow seed. You might see it in pet food stores for millet for your birds. And it's also a nutritious flour for us gluten-free people. It's also a very light flour. The next one is cassava flour, and it comes from the cassava root. So the root is dehydrated and ground. It absorbs water a lot. So if you want to use cassava flour in your recipes, you need to probably add a little bit extra water or other liquid. And next I have potato flour. It's a heavy flour, very absorbent as well, very dusty. I use it in my cupcake recipes to give them a really nice moist texture. So next we have starches. So starches make up about 1/3 of each mix. So I have potato starch. So like the potato flour, it absorbs a lot of water and is a bit of a coarse, heavy starch. My favorite starch to use, but also the most expensive, is arrowroot starch. You might remember it from arrowroot cookies, but I love to use it as a starch. It absorbs water really well, but leaves a really nice fine crumb in your baking. And then the other type of starch that's really well known and popular to use in gluten-free baking is cassava or tapioca starch. So it's not the flour, the cassava flour, but a starch from soaking the cassava root in water, drying that, and then getting the starch from it. So when you're making a gluten-free mix, you need usually 3 of these components at least in your mix. So you need a light flour, a heavy flour, and a starch. Sometimes you want to mix potato starch and one of the other 2, arrowroot or tapioca starch, together to get a more moist mix. So my favorite mix to use in most of my baking is sorghum, millet, and arrowroot together. So it's just in thirds. And if I put other flours in that mix, it's usually oat, sorghum, tapioca. You mix 2 flours together, a light and a heavy, and a starch in thirds. So next I want to go over how to make a great flaxseed egg for your recipes. If you ever make vegan baking, replacing eggs is always a major component of that baking. So first off, a flaxseed egg needs to be really gooey for it to work properly in your baking. A lot of recipes call for a flaxseed egg to be made in about 5 minutes, which I have found does not work at all. So my general rule is your flaxseed needs to be very finely ground. The ratio is 1 part flaxseed to 3 parts water, and I use boiling water for this to really get the flaxseed dissolved. When I do a heaping 1. So in this cup measure I have a heaping 1 cup. I'm going to put that in a 4-cup measure. And then I'm going to mix in my boiled water, hot water, up to the 4-cup point. It's a little bit sticky. The boiling water gets it sticky right away for you. So you just want to keep stirring. And then I'm going to fill it up just to 4 cups. I don't want to fill it over that. So then I'm going to stir this about 3 times over an hour. And each time I stir it, you're going to find that it gets gooier and gooier until it gets to this consistency where it's a blob of flaxseed. Now I want to show you guys how to make some muffins. They're one of the easiest things to start with when you're starting with gluten-free baking. I've got a book from the library called Gluten-Free Baking by Rebecca Riley. I really like this book because she uses flour mixes that are easy to find. She uses a lot of brown rice flour, so I just swapped that out with my sorghum flour and it worked great. So the coconut raspberry muffins are an easy one to make because they are a simple 2-step, just your wet and your dry. So I have in my bowl a mix of sorghum flour in 2 parts, and then tapioca and potato starch, which is what was recommended in the recipe book. And to my flours, I'm going to add in a 1/4 cup of almond flour, 1/2 cup of sugar. If you're a strict vegan, you can use cane sugar or organic sugar. And then I have pre-measured out 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of xanthan gum, and 1/8 teaspoon of salt. Xanthan gum is an important part of gluten-free baking for most bakeries and even home bakers. It helps replicate the stickiness of gluten in your recipes. Don't leave out your xanthan gum because it's really important. It's not harmful to you at all, and it's actually beneficial to you in small quantities. So I'm going to stick those in there. A really important part in gluten-free baking is to make sure that the xanthan gum is evenly distributed in your flour mix before you add in wet ingredients. So I use a whisk to do this, and I just whisk the entire thing until it's a homogeneous consistency. So there's all my dry ingredients done. I make a well in the center, just like regular muffins, that I'm going to pour my wet ingredients into. For the wet ingredients, I have a 1/2 cup of hot milk, and the milk just wants to be heated up to the point where it's kind of steaming, so about 30 seconds in the microwave. I have a 1/2 cup of melted vegan margarine in this case. If you're not vegan or you don't need dairy-free, you can use butter. So my favorite margarine to use is Baysell margarine because it's a nice soft margarine. I don't find that some of the harder ones work well in baking. My flaxseed egg has been stored in the fridge, so it's nice and gooey. So after you've mixed your flaxseed egg for about an hour, or 3 times in 1 hour, I put it in the fridge to let it cool down before I put it in my baking. So I have a 1/2 cup here, so each 1/4 cup of the mix equals 1 egg. So I have a 1/2 cup here equaling 2 eggs. And then again, I'm going to whisk this mix really well together before adding it. So when you're making your mix, you want the flaxseed egg to be distributed evenly. It's a very sticky, gooey mixture. The milk that I used is soy milk. I like soy milk because it adds a lot of protein to your baking. But if you're sensitive to soy or don't want to eat it, there's lots of other kinds to choose from. My other favorites are almond and oat milk to use in my baking. So you can see the consistency is kind of a gooey mixture there. I am going to add my wet ingredients into my dry ingredients. Just making sure to use a spatula to get all those wet ingredients out of the bowl, because you have quite a bit in there if it's not done this way. And now with my two ingredients together, I'm going to use my whisk again and whisk this. The xanthan gum is going to start working right away as soon as the wet hits the dry, so you need to act pretty quickly. And you want to make sure that everything is just incorporated. Getting all of the dry up from the bottom of the bowl is very important. So everything's incorporated in, the wet into the dry. And now I'm going to add my coconut, which is an unsweetened shredded coconut. It's 1 cup. And then to keep the nice consistency of my dough at this point, I'm going to fold in the coconut. So folding in just means scooping the dough up from the bottom and folding it over. So I'm going to do this about 5 times, and that should get the coconut in. I don't want to over mix it at this point because you'll get a very tough muffin. There. So now I have my coconut mixture mixed in. For my muffin pan, I don't want to use muffin pan liners at this point. I'm going to oil the pan instead. A lot of time with gluten-free baking, your muffins will stick to muffin liners, so it's a better idea to use a greased pan instead. If you can't have soy, just watch on your spray that it doesn't use soy lecithin. There's a lot now that have sunflower lecithin instead as a lubricant. So the recipe calls to put 1/4 cup of batter into each muffin. And I like using a muffin scoop for this so that I get really good consistent muffins so they all bake evenly and have a nice rounded top. If you don't have a muffin scoop, then you can use a 1/4 cup measure and just scrape them into the muffin pan, or 2 spoons also works. Okay, so my last muffin is a little bit small, that's okay. I'm going to steal some from this muffin beside it that I overfilled. Ta-da, you're all good. Okay, the last step in the recipe is to take our raspberry jam and put it into a dollop into the center of the muffin. But so that the jam doesn't slide off while it's baking, we need to make a well in the muffin. So I'm just going to take a spoon and poke a little hole in the muffin. For the raspberry jam, I want about 1 teaspoon per muffin. And I squish it down into the muffin so that it stays in the center. If you like other jams, if you like apricot, raspberry, blueberry, they all taste great with these muffins, so then you can change up your recipe very easily by just changing your jam. And I find with gluten-free baking, it's great to incorporate different flavors into it. Some of the flours have a strong taste, and if you incorporate different fruits and things that your mouth is familiar with, it makes it a lot easier to not recognize those flour tastes. Okay, so we have our muffins all ready to go into the oven. They are going to go in for 20 minutes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, and my oven has been preheating while I've been making the muffins.
So while the muffins are baking, we have brought a couple of the gluten-free cookbooks that we have at the Oxford County Library.
So when you're looking for a good library book that's for gluten-free baking, you want to find one that uses either weights or appropriate measures for the baking. Weighing your flours is the best way because they can be fluffy or condensed, and it really makes a difference when you're doing your cooking. And I really like finding books that are knowledgeable about gluten-free. So some books will have in the front the different flours that they're using and why and that type of thing. So then you're learning more about gluten-free as you're baking as well. There's one book that I started out with when I was starting my gluten-free baking journey about 10 years ago, the Everything Gluten-Free Baking Cookbook. This is a great book, and it also includes vegan recipes in the back half of the book so that you can get a full range of recipes there for people who are dairy-free, egg-free, or vegan.
So Alayne, you said you started your journey about 10 years ago. Do you want to explain more on that?
Yeah, sure. So about 10 years ago, I was really ill and I couldn't figure out why. Doctors were not very helpful. They didn't know what was going on either. And at the same time, my mom and my sister were figuring out also that they needed to be on a gluten-free diet. So I gave it a try, and right away I noticed a difference. Then I went to a naturopathic doctor to get more help on the subject because they're very knowledgeable. And they gave me a blood test that looks for about 300 different sensitivities to different foods. That came back with about 20 different things on it for me. So big ones for me were the gluten, dairy, and eggs, but also things like cashews, rice. There's many different things on there, even potatoes to begin with I had to eliminate from my diet. So after I eliminated all those, about 3 years later, I could start bringing things back in. Potatoes, a little bit of rice here and there didn't bother me, but always gluten, milk, and eggs always bothered me. So I had to figure out baking, especially when my two daughters were diagnosed with the same thing. So then I started playing around with recipes. I started figuring out the flours that I could have. Gluten-free has come so far in 10 years. It's amazing what's available now in stores for bakers and even for just what's out there to purchase in store. So I started Rosy's Gluten-Free Kitchen because I wanted to share that with people that I know really struggle finding those things in Oxford County. So I started the kitchen about a year ago. It's here on my property in Oxford County. And I sell to different places, including the Old Bakery Cafe. And this week there's actually a new store opening up in Norwich called At the 100th Mile. And she's going to carry all products that are made within 100 miles of Norwich. So I'm really excited to be part of that journey. I also partner with Habitual Chocolate in Woodstock, and I make them chocolate cookies, and I use their chocolate in the cookies. So lots of great opportunities. And then I also sell my products on my website, www.rosyskitchen.ca. And you can pre-order all your products there. I bake them fresh for you that morning, and then you come and pick them up and enjoy them really fresh right out of the oven.
That's awesome. So definitely check out where you can find Rosy's Kitchen on the website and a couple stores around Oxford County, and check out some gluten-free cookbooks at your local library.
And if you want to find out more about Rosy's and follow my specials and all the latest things that I'm doing, you want to follow me on social media. I'm on Facebook, Rosy's GF Kitchen, and on Instagram, Rosy's_GF Kitchen. So I post all of my things there, extras during the week, sales, all that type of thing, or you can also sign up for my newsletter through my website. Awesome. So our muffins have been in the oven for 20 minutes. They've puffed up great, all our raspberry jam stayed in place. So I have some that I baked earlier here, and I'm going to get those. And what I'm going to do with these is dust some powdered sugar on top, and it just makes a nice decoration for presentation purposes. So to do that, I just have a little bit of powdered sugar and a sieve, and I'm just going to put the powdered sugar in here. I'm doing it on a baking tray so that I don't get my counter all dirty, and I'm just going to lightly tap my sugar onto the muffins. There, so we have a nice presentation for us to share our muffins with our friends. And I'm going to cut one open for you so that you can see what the inside looks like. So a nice crumb in our muffin using the sorghum flour blend. And these are nice and light and fluffy. You won't have any hard muffins using sorghum flour.
Well, it smells delicious in here. They look amazing. Can we try them?
For sure you can try them, I love it.
They look so good. Delicious. They're very fluffy. I don't know what texture I expected, but they are fantastic.
Good.
Really good.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell that they're gluten-free?
Absolutely not.
No,
Not
Good.
at all.
That means you've baked successfully when you can't tell it's gluten-free.
no, not at all. These are phenomenal. Definitely recommend checking these out, ordering some for yourselves because we're not going to share them.
Make sure to check out books at the library for gluten-free and vegan cooking. There's so much to choose from. I'm a huge library fan. Always go check out the books. You can buy them later if you like them.
And like we said earlier, be sure to check out Rosy's Kitchen on social media and the website and order yourself some treats.
And don't forget to keep track of everything that's happening at the library at www.ocl.net. You can see all of our upcoming programs on our program calendar. You can find all our other Oxford Eats videos on our YouTube channel. Thank you for having us in your kitchen today.
Thanks so much for coming. I really enjoyed having you guys here, sharing my knowledge, and just letting people know that gluten-free isn't scary.
Yeah, thank you so much. We really appreciate this. And thank you all for joining us again for another Oxford Eats video. Until next time, bye!